my makeup artist called in sick today. So, good afternoon and welcome back to the Suburban Rifleman, everyone. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a sporterized rifle. I know that these are, a lot of people look down their nose at sporterized rifles. Everybody wants nice, minty, all original military surplus rifles, but they are getting harder and harder to find. I had quite a few of them, but I've also always been someone who's not able to easily pass up a good deal. So I've ended up with a fair number of decent sporterized military rifles as well. This one started life as a K98 Mauser. It's not German. Well, it was made by the Germans, but it was made in Czechoslovakia. This is a DOT production code, which is the German code for what they called Waffenfabrik Brunn, but we know it today as Brno in the Czech Republic. I don't remember the exact year. It's either 1943 or 1944. Unfortunately, the front scope mount is over top of the production code and the production year. This is definitely not, it didn't start life as a Kriegsmodell. It's not quite that rough, but it is definitely a wartime production rifle, obviously wartime production rifle. We've got the stamped sheet metal trigger guard and floor plate on the magazine. The surface of the receiver has very obvious sort of rough machine marks. The barrel's done a little bit better, but you can still see that that's sort of hurried wartime production. But the rifle is very smooth. It cycles very smoothly. All the internal surfaces that need to be nicely finished are nicely finished. Probably is not the sort of rifle I would have chosen if I were in the habit of sporterizing rifles or making a hunting rifle, but the whole idea behind most of these sporterized rifles was to make cheap hunting rifles. Back in those days, military surplus rifles were dirt cheap, and hunting rifles were quite expensive. And today, that situation has sort of flipped. You can get a really nice modern sporting rifle for not a whole lot of money and be shooting minute of angle right out of the box for a couple $100. And to get an original Mauser, World War II vintage, or certainly World War I vintage, you're going to be spending a lot of money. So it just doesn't make sense anymore. And of course, it's a very controversial topic. People don't like it very much, but you can get a good shooter out of one of these things. And the fact is, a lot of these sporterization jobs were done in the United States. GIs brought rifles back, or people just bought cheap surplus rifles from companies who were importing them into the country during the 1940s and 50s and 60s. But a lot of these were also produced in Germany by German gunsmiths. The German economy was in the crapper after World War II for obvious reasons. And a lot of German gunsmiths made money by converting the tons and tons of surplus military rifles that were available at the time into economical sporting rifles and selling them to GIs and who brought them home and used them for hunting. I originally thought that this rifle was not a Bubba job, but one that was done by a gunsmith in the United States, and that's partially true. But after putting on my my detective hat and looking at some of the features of this rifle, it's pretty clear, and it can be quite interesting if you want to do the research yourself on your own rifle. I was able to determine that this rifle's been done in several stages, which I'm not going to bore you with. I know a lot of you get upset when I go on and on and on, but it's a pretty interesting rifle. The stock looked absolutely terrible when I got it. I almost threw it away. It was covered in this chocolate brown gloppy polyurethane finish. It looked like an absolute garbage stock, and I almost threw it away and put a replacement stock on it, but luckily I got the idea well, let's strip it down and see what it looks like. And it actually has a really nice piece of European walnut underneath there with very fine checkering, very well executed. The lines are beautiful. So, you know, this rifle is really not worth much as far as money, but it's a very good shooter. And it really, I think it's a very attractive rifle. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and shoot it. Oh, by the way, I did mount, when I got the rifle, it had a 3-9x40 Swift, old 1960s vintage Japanese-made Swift scope on it with very fine target crosshairs. And I would have kept that scope, but unfortunately the internal adjustments were frozen, both the elevation and the windage. So I went ahead and mounted a Minox ZV3 scope on here. It's appropriate, German scope, German rifle. And this is also a 3-9x40. And we will be shooting my personal hand loads. These are, I think, 196 grain Nosler partitions. This is ammo I loaded up in 2012 prior to the hunting trip I took to South Africa with my dad and my nephew. So let's go ahead and take a few shots with this rifle and see how it shoots. Okay, so I've got 5 rounds loaded. We're shooting at 100 yards. I've already taken 5 shots at this target with a different rifle, so you're going to have to take my word for my group size, but I'm not in the habit of making fraudulent videos. So let's go ahead and shoot this. I'm going to take 5 shots. One thing that's really nice about this rifle, one of the things that was done here in the United States during this rifle's second round of modifications was this very low California-style bolt knob was put on here. These were very popular in the 1960s, sort of Weatherby styled. The nice thing is they're very low and it wraps around the scope, which allowed me to mount the scope at a relatively low setting. So it's the axis of the scope is very close to the axis of the bore, and I get a nice cheek weld on the rifle. So that's all conducive to good shooting. Okay. All right, so of course I had a little bit of a jam while the camera was running, but we've got that cleared. So let's go ahead and take a few shots with this thing. This does have the original 2-stage military trigger, which is a little bit heavier than I would like. But it is manageable.
Just an inch below it.
Ah?
An inch below your first shot. Did I forget my hearing protection?
Well, how about putting it back on now, because I got one more shot to take.
I better. Okay.
Now this video is going to be a complete train wreck.
There's always next week.
So unfortunately we weren't able to finish this video up at the club. We started shooting this last week, Thursday night, and we neglected to check the club calendar before we went up there. We forgot that Thursday night is trap shooting night at the club. And when the trap shooters started showing up for their scheduled event, we had to relinquish the range and come home. We've been at camp for the entire intervening week, and when we came back here, it was my intention to finish up this video and shoot a couple others. And we went over to the club tonight to finish doing some shooting, and of course, it's trap shooting night again. It's Thursday night again. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to finish the shooting segment of this video. But and I don't even have a target to show you because the trap shooters wanted to be on schedule, and I asked if they could pull my target for me when they were done, and they were very gracious in saying that they would do so, but I don't have a target to show you. So I'll just explain to you what was going on with this rifle, why I think I was having a few problems, and of course I can produce another video once I think I have those sorted out. Generally, this rifle was shooting absolutely fantastically. For an 80-year-old military surplus rifle that was made to obvious wartime standards, now I do have a pretty decent optic on here, but for the age of the rifle and this rather terrible two-stage military trigger, it was shooting fantastically, at least off a mechanical shooting rest. I was getting somewhere between an inch and an inch and a half at 100 yards most of the time. The problem I was running into, and I believe it's all ammunition related, which goes back to these hand loads that I made in 2012 for a hunting trip to South Africa. These were loaded using once-fired brass from another 8x57 Mauser that I had. And I believe I was just neck sizing these to kind of preserve the case. I like to extend case life by doing as little resizing as possible. And this rifle clearly has shorter head space than my old rifle. Some of these cartridges will chamber just fine in the rifle. They'll all chamber fine. But with some of these loads, when I close the bolt and start turning down the bolt handle, you can feel a fair amount of friction. Not so much as to cause concern, but some friction, which means there's absolutely no gap in that head space. And when I would fire those rounds, I was getting slightly elevated pressures, which would take my inch to inch and a half group and suddenly turn it into a 3-inch group or a 4-inch group, because a round would go about 3 inches or 4 inches high. And that was kind of wrecking my groups. And so what I'm going to do is, I only have about 5 rounds of these hand loads left, and I've got tons of empty brass. I'm going to go back and full-length resize all of these cases and make up new hand loads. Otherwise, they seem to be shooting fine. When I wasn't having any pressure turning down the bolt handle, they were grouping nice, tight little groups at 100 yards. So I don't see any reason to really play around with the load data. I mean, I could in the future, but I'm going to start with those loads, but I'm going to full-length resize these cases. And if anybody's interested in seeing the results of that ammunition, once I shoot it, I will be more than happy to produce another video. Just go ahead and comment in the comments down below. Also, I spared those of you who don't like my long-windedness. I spared you the agony of having to listen to my detective work, the process through which I deduced that this rifle has been through at least 2 stages of modification, one in Germany, one here in the United States. Now, there may be some gun nerds out there who are actually interested in hearing what my thought process was. And if you are, again, go ahead and comment down below. I will happily produce that video. It'll probably be a bit long-winded and it'll be a bit esoteric. Most people won't even watch it. But if you want to see it, I will make it. And when I post that video, I hope to see each of you here then. Later, guys.